Welcome to this second conference about educational vision. This time about this opportunity about educational vision. I want to welcome all of you students and graduate students, most of you from the English and the Spanish program. I want to present Dr. Alex Sinclair. Dr. Alex Sinclair is, I will read the video. Dr. Alex Sinclair is or was the Chief Content Officer for the Educating for Impact. He has talked, written, and spoken widely on Jewish education, Israel, diaspora relations, and Israeli politics in both academic and popular contexts. He was professor of education at the Jewish Theological Seminary for almost 2 decades, and has worked or consulted for a wide variety of other educational and communal institutes. His first book, Loving the Real Israel, an educational agenda for liberal Zionism, was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award in 2013. He lives with his wife and 3 children in Modi'in. In addition, I want to say that Alex Sinclair was one of our first lecturers in our distance program in Spanish. He produces the course Vision in Jewish Education that we translated to Spanish to teachers and to directors in Mexico and Argentina and Brazil and other countries in America Latina with a lot of success. And because of this, I invite Dr. Sinclair to join to our program from this year, the next semester, to learn, to teach, and to produce again this course. And I'm very glad that Dr. Sinclair accepted the invitation and will join to our team. And I think students that will study with Alex will enjoy, but all of you that are going to be in this conference will enjoy. Now, about this conference is translated to Spanish. I invite you who wants the translation have to press in the icon interpretation that is in the bottom of your monitor, and in the when you press, you have to press Spanish, okay, to listen Spanish. If no, you are going to listen original audio. You are going to listen in English. That is the language of the code. Okay. Thank you, and Alex, your time.
Thank you, Marcelo. I'm really happy to be here with you all, and it's exciting to hear about the success of the course in Spanish, which they say as educators, you sow the seeds of things with the kids that you teach or the students that you teach, and sometimes you don't see the fruits. And so this is an occasion where I sowed the seeds in English, and I never saw the fruits because I don't speak Spanish. But I'm excited to be rejoining Melton and rejoining this program in this new way. Now I have a PowerPoint that's going to be accompanying us during the session here, but I'm going to stop first because I just want to be able to see everybody. And it would be really helpful for me. I know that I imagine that some or many of you know each other, but I don't know any of you. So if you could just quickly put in the chat, I've got your name. Put in the chat, where you live and what you do in your educational life. And it'll just be ping, 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 and that'll be really helpful for me to get a sense of who you all are. So just take a minute.
1 second, Alex, before you continue. I ask you to open the camera, okay, please, because it's very important. We are in the camera open, and Alex want to meet you, and it's more harm and familiarity to see your faces. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's great. As Cynthia has just done, although Mexico died does not seem like a very good, very auspicious beginning to the conversation, but hopefully I see that the typo. Yeah,
sorry, I'm so sorry.
It's fine. It's good. It's all good.
I pressed the enter button. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's fine. So if everybody could just do that, and that exactly as Mara has done. Oh, thank you. That would be great. So I get a sense of that. Just one sentence like Tamara and Cynthia have done would be great. It doesn't have to be a lot. Just let me know where you're coming from right now and what you do. Is that Brighton, England, Matt Marks? Is that Brighton, the Brighton that I know, or is that a different Brighton? Wow. Cool. Okay, so if you didn't yet do that, then please just continue to do that. And they'll keep pinging through, and I'll see them as they ping through. And that will be helpful for me as we go. I'm going to put my screen back on. Okay. So what I want to talk about today, and I should also say, if I speak too quickly, then say so. And Jeanette, the translator, if I'm speaking too quickly for you, then please say so as well. I'll try to moderate. I sometimes do go too quickly. So, what I want to talk about today are these this idea of the connection between vision and practice. If you're studying at the Mercad Melton at the Hebrew University, which you all are, then you'll know that vision is an important part of, I would say, the DNA of the Mercad, the DNA of Melton, and that really goes back to this man here, Seymour Fox, Zichrono Livracha. Seymour Fox, who was the founder of the Melton Center, and who the Melton Center, or the School of Education, actually, I should say, is now named after, is really, I would say, almost single-handedly. I mean, he had lots of collaborators that he brought along, but he really was responsible for bringing thinking about theory and vision, and we'll talk a little bit maybe later on about if there are differences between those two words, but for now I'm going to use them interchangeably, theory and vision. And Seymour Fox really brought the thinking and the language of vision into the Melton Center and into the Jewish world. But although I was a student of Seymour Fox and a massive admirer of him, and owe a lot of who I am right now and what I've done in my career, I owe a lot of that to him and to the kind of school of thought that he that he established. But I think that one of the weaknesses of the vision school, of the thinking and the writing and the teaching and the talking about vision, about theory, is that the move from theory to practice was neglected. And so today what I want to do is talk a little bit about that move from theory to practice, and those of you who are interested hopefully will get a chance to study this more with me later on in the year or next year. So if you look on the screen now, you'll see this is from a piece that Seymour Fox wrote in 1997, which in a way summarizes, this was, I guess, towards the end of his career, and this kind of summarized a lot of his work, he argued that there were really 5 stages in this movement from theory to practice. And you see those here on the top right of the screen: philosophy of education, theory of practice, practice, and evaluation. It's kind of clear what philosophy is, and maybe it's a little clear what philosophy of education is, and it's certainly clear what practice is, and I think probably clear what evaluation is. But that phrase in the middle there, theory of practice, that's the one which we're going to talk about today. And I think that's the one where we as a field, as a community of Jewish educators, still have a lot of work that we could do about that. You see that Fox argued that you could go from theory to practice in both ways. You could go from theory to practice, from 1 through 5, and you can also go from practice to theory. Although in reality, the left-hand side, 1 through 5, was for the most part what we've done in the field. Now, Fox defines theory of practice in the following way. He says there are 2 steps in it. Step 1 is the analysis of philosophy of education, and the implications of philosophy of education for teaching. And step 2, which is the one that I'm actually more interested in, we're going to talk about today. Step 2 is what he says is the specification of the product of curriculum making, which will embody the approach to subject matter and pedagogy. Okay, now that's a complicated sentence, and it's made more complicated by the fact that Fox wrote in this piece in 1997. He wrote that step 2, examples of step 2 are almost non-existent. In other words, this really important piece of educational thinking called theory of practice, this second aspect of it, this step 2, this idea of really thinking and articulating what are the products of curriculum which are going to embody the approach to the subject matter, that this was almost non-existent. He wrote that in 1997, and I would argue that there's been no real change since then. We're now 2022, that's 25 years, and I don't think that there's really been a change in there. And still, you look around and there's no real work still has been done on this specification of the product of curriculum making. And we'll talk more about what that complicated English, what he actually means by that. Now, he talks here about 2 things within step 2. He talks about both subject matter and pedagogy. Okay, in other words, when we think about theory of practice and we think about the move from theory to practice, we have to think about how that works with regard to subject matter and how that works with regard to pedagogy. And when it comes to subject matter, one of the people who followed really part of Fox's school of thought, or actually really also one of the people that built his school of thought in collaboration with Pam Grossman, she writes about the relationship between subject matter knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge. Now, I'm going to assume that this phrase pedagogical content knowledge is familiar to you guys. I may be wrong about that. I don't know. There's a slide, the next slide coming up is a little bit of an explanation about it. So I hope the phrase at least is familiar. If not, then it doesn't matter so much. But what Pam Grossman is really arguing here is that in the move from theory to practice, we have to think about both how general pedagogical knowledge, that's over here on the right, which I haven't circled, how general pedagogy about how learners think, how classrooms are managed, all those other kinds of things, brain science, that has to inform pedagogical content knowledge, the way we actually teach particular subject matter. But she also writes that subject matter knowledge has to inform the way we teach subject matter. Now, in education, there's a relatively large amount of work has been done on general pedagogical knowledge and how that influences the way we teach. Right, so you think about John Dewey, you think about people like Montessori schools, you think about the kind of many of the theories and theoreticians of democratic education. There's a lot of people who have done thinking in the general educational world about pedagogy in general and how that can influence the way we teach. But very little has been done, certainly in the Jewish educational world, about subject matter knowledge and the kind of in-depth thinking about subject matter knowledge and how that affects the way we teach. So really this idea of theory to practice and the theory of practice is thinking about the relationship between these two areas, thinking about the relationship between subject matter knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge. All right, now here's a very brief summary of pedagogical content knowledge for people who don't know it. Again, this is one of the kind of things that I assume. I know, Marcelo, you maybe jump and tell me if I'm assuming wrong or not. But I assume that this text by Schulman is a text that's come up and that most of you will have read or heard about. Really, pedagogical content knowledge is the way we teach a specific subject matter. In other words, when we think about how we teach, it's not just, okay, I need to think about what I know about how kids learn in general, and it's not just classroom management in general, and it's not just, brain science in general and multiple intelligences and all of the stuff that we know that we share with our colleagues and our other teachers who teach math and biology and history and so on and so forth. But we also have to think about the particular ways that we teach particular subject matters. Being a biology teacher is different from being a history teacher, which is different from being a math teacher, which is different from being a Tanakh teacher or a Talmud teacher or a Tefillah teacher. Obviously, the pedagogical part is the same, but the way we teach Tefillah, the way we teach Tanakh, the way we teach Talmud, we have to really think about those things because those things are different from subject matter to subject matter. Okay, so we come back to Grossman's slide from before, and if you see in pedagogical, I'll see if I can annotate here on the right. Yeah, if you see this piece here that I haven't circled in the slide, right? Knowledge of students' understanding. That connects pretty easily up to here. Right, up to the stuff about general pedagogy and general curriculum. What I want to talk about today is the relationship between this part of the circle of pedagogical content knowledge and subject matter knowledge, because that's really where Fox talks about this hard phrase, the specification of the product of curriculum making. That's really where what he's talking about there, and that's where there should be a relationship. Right, there should be argued thought, the relationship between subject matter knowledge, I mean, I won't go into details here, the structures of the subject matter, how the different approaches to the subject matter, we'll see how that comes out later on, but really understanding the subject matter in depth, a relationship between that and between how we teach. And there I want to argue is where the breakdown has occurred, right? In other words, that when we think about the way we teach Tanakh, the way we teach Tefillah, the way we teach Talmud, the way we teach all kinds of other aspects of Jewish studies, we don't make enough of a connection in our thinking and our planning about teaching between deep subject matter knowledge and the curricular, the content-based, the subject-based aspects of pedagogical content knowledge. Now, I want to get a little practical now, and so far we've been very theoretical, and I'm going to move to practice and actually put you to work in it in a second as well, because I want to talk about big ideas and essential questions. big ideas and essential questions are, in my opinion, the core curricular instructional strategies that we use to connect what goes on in the classroom to deep subject matter knowledge. So what I want to do is I want to pause for a minute and look at these two words here, big ideas and essential questions. And I want to do a little bit of a check-in with you guys to see if these terms are familiar and what you know about them. So I'm gonna stop talking for a minute, and what I'd like you to do is, I hope this will work, I'd like you to plug in that URL there. Right, if you open up a browser in another window, and you can minimize the Zoom, you should still be able to hear me. You should still be able to alt-tab back and forth between the Zoom and your browser. And if you plug in tinyurl.com/think-11-12-22, that's the date. That's the date in Israeli and English format, not in American format. So whoever that was who said they were from Miami, be aware that we're talking about the 11th of December, not the 12th of November. And there's the astute amongst you, the smart, the observant ones amongst you will notice that there's a 1 there, which implies that later on in this session there's going to be a 2. But for now, if you just type in that URL, you should reach a Google Doc. If you want to maybe come off, come off your mute and let me know. Give me a shout if you've reached that Google Doc correctly, and if you see it. I'm opening it now as well. And if you see that, if you go into that Google Doc, you should see a table there. Maybe what I'll do is I'll actually I'll get out. I'm gonna get out of the Zoom. I'm gonna put the table up.
Alex,
yeah.
put the link in the chat.
Okay, I will do.
I've got it. I've signed on. This is Susie Lampert. I've signed on.
Yeah, I can see.
I can put. Okay, I can put.
I can also put it in the chat. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll just stop sharing that screen, and I will start sharing this one just in case anybody can't get to it. And what I want you to do is, if you can just plug in. There are, I guess, right and wrong answers, but this is really just a check for understanding. I just want to check. Do you know what these terms mean? And can you give maybe just little examples of them from your own work? And if you don't, then that's fine, you can leave it blank. But if anybody knows what those terms mean or has a sense of heard them before, you should be able to plug into your cursor here and type a definition, right? You see, you should all be able to do that, or give an example. So let's just spend a minute or two. If anyone knows these terms or has heard of them, has a definition in their head that they could put down on there, has an example that comes to their mind that they've used before maybe, then that would be just helpful for me to know if these terms are terms that mean anything to you, that you've used before. And I would say if you don't know these terms, please feel free. Please come off mute. Please unmute yourself and just shout out. I don't know what this means, or I've never heard this. And that's fine. I mean, I'm gonna give you some examples in a minute.
Alex,
yeah.
Alex, maybe you can check your microphone because the sound is not.
It's not good. Let me try. I'll try holding. I'll try speaking slower. and I'll try holding my microphone close.
Slow is good, but check your micro.
Let's go. Yeah, I know. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. I thought. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Yeah, no, I know. I need to tap before I need to hold it close enough. Oh, still it's not. It's still not good. Okay, hold on. I'll unplug it. Yeah. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
I think it's better.
It's better now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, no, I apologize. Okay, nobody has examples of essential questions. This is fine. Like I said, there's no problem if you don't. It's just helpful for me to know if you told it. So let me go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to actually share with you some examples or some definitions. So this phrase "big idea" comes two American curriculum writers or curriculum theorists called Grant Wiggins and Jerry McTighe.
No, Alex, it's not good. The audio is not good.
The audio is not good?
Maybe you can come back to it's worse. I agree. Come back to the previous situation. I don't know.
Really sorry.
Okay. Music here.
Okay, how's this? Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, I hope it will. I hope it will last this way. I'm gonna try to speak slowly, and I'm gonna try to keep my voice, my microphone close to my mouth. Okay, so I'm gonna share the screen again, and let me talk a little bit about these. Give some definitions and some examples of big ideas and essential questions, and then what I hope you'll see is that what we'll do is we'll show how these very practical pedagogic tools can connect us from practice to theory and from theory to practice. So Wiggins and McTighe argue that these are some definitions they give of big ideas. These are short statements of a few words, of 5 to 10 words, which come from a deep understanding of the content. Right, that's that first bullet point there. They reflect expert understanding of the subject matter. They're not superficial. They really deeply connect to the subject matter being taught, and they give meaning to that subject matter. Maybe let's look at a couple of examples of big ideas. Here's an example. For example, not all heroes are famous. Now, that's a great big idea if you want to study, for example, Shmot Perek Bet, right, which is the story of the midwives. Okay, the midwives who saved the Israelite children from the Israelite sons from being killed, and these are heroes who are not famous. These are heroes who are not shouted about from the rooftops. And so this idea that not all heroes are famous is a core. It's a big idea because it's a statement that you can help kids think about. They can connect that to the biblical text. They can connect that to their own lives. They can connect that to other things going on in their lives, other subject matters that they're learning, and it's an idea that will help them make sense of what's being studied. So you see, it's as a big idea, it fits all of these kinds of all of these definitions, right? It's helping kids understand why they're learning a particular text. If they're struggling with the text, if they're not understanding why they're learning it, this is a way to give them the reason why we're learning this, because it's really important and powerful to think about the idea that, wow, not all heroes are famous. It's a big idea. An essential question, and maybe we'll do it the other way around. We'll go the other way around, right? An essential question like this: why does a nation need a leader? That's an essential question that Bible teachers would often use when teaching about Moshe, or teaching sometimes about Sefer Shoftim, the book of Judges, maybe even teaching about Abraham, about Abraham. It's the question which, actually, when you stop and think about it, is a very powerful question. Why does a nation need a leader? Right? And if you see these definitions of essential questions, they're questions that stimulate student curiosity to find the answers. They invite students into the learning process. They're open-ended, right? They don't have yes or no answers, and they have emotive force. They're punchy, powerful questions. Wow, why does a nation need a leader? Does my classroom need a leader? Does my school need a leader? Does my youth movement need a leader? What kind of leader should that person be? These are things. These are questions which connect the subject matter, in this case the biblical text, to the students' own lives, to other things the students may be studying, if they're studying literature or history, general history, or other kinds of things, or politics or social studies, where they might be thinking about leadership. So it's a way to connect Jewish studies to other studies, Jewish studies to life, Jewish studies to the student. Now, what's crucial is that both big ideas and essential questions should be connected to the subject matter. They should be connected to a deep understanding of the vision of the discipline, the theory of the discipline. In other words, developing good big ideas and good essential questions is an exercise in the theory of practice. Now, if you look at these two examples that I gave, which are both excellent, a big idea is an excellent big idea and it's an excellent essential question. But these are big ideas and essential questions which exist without theory of practice. In other words, they are disconnected from vision. They're disconnected from theory. Or at least we don't know how they're connected to vision, or how they're connected to theory. You know, they're good questions, and teachers like to use them. And I've done a lot of work over these with Tanakh teachers, and giving Tanakh teachers these big ideas and these kinds of essential questions really helps them structure their teaching and get kids connected to the text, and get kids interested and excited about reading the text and reading Tanakh. But they're only connected to practice. They're not connected to vision. What I believe that we need to do is to connect theory to practice, so that big ideas and essential questions are connected to particular structures within the subject matter. Let me say a little bit more about what I mean by that. I'm introducing a new term here, this term educational standard. And what I want to argue is that vision should lead to an educational standard, which should then lead to big ideas and essential questions. This term, educational standard, is the new term that I've just put in there, so let's try to define it. An educational standard is an overarching learning outcome that exhibits a synthesis of knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. Let me give you a couple of examples about what these standards are, because it's much easier to understand them with some examples. These are examples that come from a project that I was very, very involved in for many, many years, the Standard and Benchmark project, where we did work with Jewish day schools teaching Tanakh, helping teachers develop their theory and practice of teaching Tanakh. And these are some of the standards that we work with. So, for example, if you look at if you look at the bottom one as an example to begin with, students will develop a love of Torah study, Torah Lishma, for its own sake, and embrace it as an inspiring resource in forming their values, moral commitments, and ways of experiencing the world. That is a oh great, go for it, go annotate. Yeah, Maristella's annotating, which is great. We can see the annotation, but so if there's something you want to show us and point to, then please unmute yourself and shout out and tell us what you're doing. That's great. That's a standard which is an overarching, I'm going to go back to the previous slide, right? It's an overarching learning outcome that exhibits a synthesis of knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. Knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. Here's another one. If you look at the very top one here, students will appreciate Tanakh as a multivocal text with a complex history of development. That's another example that of a standard which relates to subject matter in a synthesizing way. It tells you what students are going to learn, how they're going to learn, and what kinds of things they need to do with the subject matter. Now, there was another little exercise that I wanted you to do now, which is underneath here in this link at the bottom of the screen. It's the same as before, except 2 instead of 1. So if you type in tinyurl.com/think111222-2, that's going to take you to another little exercise, which we're going to do together now. And I'm going to stop the share and and now I'm going to share the screen here. Now, what I want to do now is I want us to think about those standards and try to see if we can think about the connection between those standards and theory or vision. So if you look at that question there on the right-hand column, what scholar, school of thought, academic or religious approach, or even a course title that you've studied, either in this context or different contexts, would this standard seem to be built on? So if you look at those 4 standards there, are all big overarching learning outcomes that we'd want for students in learning Tanakh. Can you think of anything that comes to mind, any thoughts you have, and there are no right or wrong answers necessarily here, a scholar, school of thought, an approach, either an academic approach or a religious approach, that this standard relates to, that this standard seems to be built on, this standard seems to be connected to. So So if anybody wants to take a stab, and you can type away in here, right, in these blocks here,
Alex, can you put the link in the chat?
Yeah. Okay, let me do that. Good. Okay, that's the link. That's the link with the link, and you should be able to go into that. So if you have a look at for each of these standards on the left-hand column, what if you've studied any Tanakh, if you teach Tanakh, if you've taken any Tanakh courses, either at Hebrew U or other places, what kinds of approaches? It doesn't have to be a specific scholar or a specific school. What kind of approaches, what kinds of courses, what kinds of people maybe that you've studied with, do these things seem to be connected to? Do these things seem to be rooted in? Do these standards seem to be built upon? Take a stab. There's no right or wrong answers. Thank you. I see you as a anonymous duck and anonymous ibex. You know that Google gives you funny names, so you may see different names. Okay, great. Thank you, Nechama Leibovich, Levina. Anyone else want to jump in with some ideas? Don't worry about spelling if English is not your first language, or even if English is your first language and you have trouble with spelling things. Don't worry. No, don't worry about that. Great. I think that's okay. Thank you, anonymous llama. Anyone want to take a stab at anything in that third box that's lying empty? Give it another minute, and then I'm going to return to the PowerPoint. Okay, interesting. Alex Thompson. Okay, Alex Thompson is somebody who we always get mistaken for each other because we're both English, Alex, Jewish education. So I'm always getting confused with him, and he often gets confused with me. I think he's great. I love him. Okay, I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. Now, what I want to suggest, and actually I'm now rethinking this based on whoever wrote David Hartman. I think that's actually going to make me change something I was going to say in a minute. I want to suggest that some standards, some learning outcomes that we have for our students can be more theory-driven than others. So I would suggest that these two ones that I have on the screen right now, these two are more theory-driven. Right, if you look at that one on the left, students will appreciate Tanakh as a multivocal text with a complex history of development. That's a standard I think somebody wrote Nechama Leibovich. That would be an interesting conversation actually about Nechama Leibovich to see to what extent she really ties into she certainly is about the multivocal text. Definitely very, very Nechama Leibovichian. The history of development is maybe a little bit more about academic biblical studies, biblical criticism, source criticism, and all that kind of stuff. Those of you who maybe have studied with with some of the kind of the Hebrew U professors in the Talk Mikra, maybe have had experience of that kind of approach to the text. This standard here is very, very much connected to that more academic study of the text, looking at the text history, looking at the text development over time in biblical times and where different parts of it came from, etc., etc. The one on the right is a very different kind of a theoretical approach that underlies this standard, right? If you look at that one, Alex Thompson talked about it, you said in his course, one could imagine this being an approach to Tanakh that is used in maybe yeshivas in Israel today. It's maybe a more political kind of approach to Tanakh and the place of Tanakh in modern Israel. But they're very different. One can imagine building a school or building even a class teaching Tanakh around this left-hand one. That is going to look very, very different from teaching a class that's built around this right-hand one, right? Imagine a school or a class that's really focusing on this left-hand one is going to really focus on teaching the Bible through a kind of biblical criticism approach, maybe kind of multivocal Leibovitz kind of style, other kinds of biblical scholars who focus on the text history, the way that the text has developed over time. That's going to look very different from a school or a class that teaches the Tanakh, focusing on how it connects to the land of Israel, the Eretz Israel, how that connects to the theological experiences of the Jewish people. Very, very different classes. I think that these other two standards might be less obviously, at least, by obviously I mean on the surface, less theory driven. Although I think that whoever wrote about David Hartman for the left one, I think I would accept that, but I think you're probably right. That maybe this is very much, that one on the left is very much connected to the way David Hartman saw the Tanakh, saw Jewish education, saw his role as a Jewish educator. But I think that one on the right is maybe a more general one. It's hard to see how that one on the right connects to a specific theory, a specific approach to the subject matter. And so I think maybe I'm going to skip over that bit. Maybe we'll skip over this bit and we'll go straight here. What I want to show you now is how some of those specific, the more theory-driven educational standards can connect backwards to vision and forwards to practice. And this is really now working on this idea of theory of practice. If you think about this educational standard, that one in the middle, students would appreciate Tanakh as a multivocal text with a complex history of development. You can see how that ties back to, as I mentioned just now, an academic, scholarship-driven approach to Bible studies concerned with the history of the text and the sources of the Torah. I should say, by the way, that relatively few, to my knowledge, Jewish schools really focus on this standard and focus on this approach to vision, this approach to the theory of Tanakh. I say that with sadness. I think that it's really, really important and interesting and powerful. You see this in a university context more than in a school context, and why that is a longer conversation for another day. But we can see how the educational standard ties back to vision, ties back to an understanding of the subject matter. Now, what about though when we go forward? What kinds of big ideas or essential questions can help us translate that theory for very practical classroom work? Because so far, what we see on this screen does not really help us practically. We see theory, we see theory of the subject matter, we see vision, we don't see practice. So let me suggest what it would look like to take this and work and work it into practice, right? I've said here, sorry, I meant to click that before. I've said here that the move from vision to standard is trying to help us understand how our overarching learning goal really get to the core of this approach to the subject matter. But now let's think about what core idea would I want students to walk away with? A core big idea that would help the students make sense of this complex vision, this complex theory of the subject matter, and give them a useful framework when encountering new material. So have a look at that big idea and see what you think about it. Let me read it out and then take a minute or two to kind of look at it and to kind of just sort of sit with it for a bit. The Torah's development as an edited anthology of different sources challenges traditional theology, but can generate meaningful modern engagement. I'll say it again, maybe, because it's still a bit kind of hard, but I mean, as I say it now, think about, and this is really for high school kids. This is not a big idea that would be used with elementary school kids or with middle school kids, probably. But those of you who teach high school, and I saw that there are a few of you in the chat at the beginning, there are some who do. What does it mean to kind of to have this big idea be a guiding framework for students who are learning Tanakh through this approach, to help them make meaning out of this approach, to help them understand why this approach can be powerful, why this approach can be meaningful. The Torah's development as an edited anthology of different sources challenges traditional theology, but can generate meaningful modern engagement. My hope would be that as a big idea, that is helping students make the connection between theory and practice. Students in high school, in a Jewish day school, are not going to go and study the academic scholarship-driven approach to Bible studies that we see expressed there in that vision. They're not going to go and study Bible scholars and academics and the people who one might study with in university. But with this big idea on the whiteboard, written on in their notebook, on the wall of the classroom, something the teacher can keep coming back to and keep talking about and keep helping kids think about, that is framed in a way where kids can understand it and can begin to understand how teaching Torah in this way relates to deep theory about the biblical text, deep theory about the subject matter itself. Now, in order to see this really clearly, I think we're going to compare it to another one of those other standards I spoke about just before. So now, one other thing I should say, which is really important, before we move on. Once you have that big idea, once you have this big idea about the Torah's development being in mythology, etc., etc. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, well, let me go back. Sorry. Yeah. Once you have that big idea, then it helps you think about really, really practical issues. What text should I teach? What other kinds of experiences and ideas should students be engaging with? Right? That's when it gets really practical. Because if I'm working from this standard, if I'm working with this big idea, that's going to push me to teach certain kinds of biblical texts and push me away from teaching other kinds of biblical texts. Right? I might want to teach the flood story and how the flood story's sources, and the flood story is a collection of different sources. I might want to teach other aspects of Bereshit, of Genesis, where we see this idea of the history of development of the text come out. It's going to push me to teach certain kinds of texts in certain kinds of ways, and not other ones. Okay, so now let's compare it. Let's compare it to this other standard that we saw before. Students will, through the study of Tanakh, understand and value that the land of Israel informs and shapes, etc., etc., etc. Now, my thought is that the approach, the religious approach this standard is built on, the religious approach or the approach to Tanakh that this standard is rooted in, is what you see there on the left, the religious Zionist approach to biblical study that emphasizes connections between text and contemporary Israeli history, geography, and reality. Now, I should say that, and maybe some of you might already be thinking or feeling this, that the selection of standards and the selection of which theory of the subject matter one chooses is not neutral, right? If I teach my kids about biblical criticism and about the sources in the flood story and about the history of development of the biblical text, that's a very different kind of teaching Tanakh to if I teach the Tanakh through this approach, connecting biblical story to contemporary Israeli geography, contemporary Israeli history. Some Jewish educators, some of you, probably some of us, might feel more connected to that first one, right? Some of you are going to feel more connected to that. Some of you are going to feel more connected to this. Some of you might have a problem with the first one, and some of you might have a problem with this one. That's really important because vision is not neutral. Educational vision is never neutral. And one of the things that taught us and continues to teach us is that the selection of vision, the thinking about theory, pushes us in certain ways to teach and is not and makes education value driven, not neutral. Now, what kind of big idea might emerge from this educational standard, from this educational vision? So here's one. The Bible is the Jewish people's title deed to the land of Israel. Now, again, this is controversial. Just as in the previous slide, talking about biblical criticism and the sources of the Bible and how that might frame the way a kid studies Bible, that's also in its own way controversial to some people. This is also going to be controversial to some people. Some Jewish educators are going to be much more attracted to the previous slide and might feel very ambivalent about this slide, and some people the other way around. That's really important because, as I said, vision is not neutral. When Fox spoke about this idea of the specification of the product of curriculum making, which will embody the approach to subject matter and pedagogy, I think what we're beginning to see is that this kind of work of connecting big ideas and essential questions, which we haven't done today, but we could continue to do, big ideas and essential questions with educational standards, with the kind of the religious or academic vision that they come from, that's really what this idea of theory of practice means. It means taking educational vision, taking theory about the subject matter, taking different approaches to the subject matter really, really seriously, and following them through so that when we get to the big ideas and essential questions that we use in classrooms, that those are going to look very, very different depending on what our theory is, right? And therefore, these very practical questions: what text should I teach? What other kinds of experiences and ideas should students be engaging with? Those will be very, very different if I started from the biblical criticism vision versus if I started from the religious Zionism vision. Educational theory is not neutral. Educational theory is not passive. Educational theory matters, and when we play with theory of practice, we see how selection of vision and translation of that vision into practice takes us into very different educational contexts, very different looking educational schools, very different looking educational classrooms, very different educational experiences. Now, it's not up to me to say which one of these you pick. Each teacher, each educator will pick a different one. But what I do believe is that doing this process of moving from vision to educational standard to big ideas and essential questions, that this is really a critical work that we do and that we should be doing. Now, I've got just a couple more things, and then I'm going to stop, and I'll have a 20 minutes or so for if there are questions and discussion, and maybe things that need maybe clarification. Practicing this is really hard, and it's really hard to do in a short amount of time, because if you want to start with a blank vision and a blank educational standard and blank big ideas and essential questions, it takes a lot of time, right? To go back to think about, different theories of the subject matter. And let's leave Bible for a minute. Let's think about Tefillah, right? If I want to think about what are the different reasons that we teach Tefillah, that we teach prayer, what are the different reasons that we might want kids to learn that? What are the different approaches to the history of Tefillah, to the theology of Tefillah? There are many different reasons and approaches that one could do, and that takes a lot of time. And then to think about the educational standard, it takes a lot of time to think about what is the educational standard, that different educational standards that might give voice to different theories of the subject matter. And then thinking about the big ideas and the essential questions, also very difficult. But one of the mistakes that we make when we think about this work is that we misunderstand the time and the thinking that's required to do this. To really understand an educational theory, to really understand, to learn a theory of a subject matter is going to take weeks at least, right? If those of you who have studied Tanakh in detail, or studied Tefillah or Talmud or Jewish history or any Jewish subject matter in detail, know that to really understand different approaches to the subject matter takes weeks and maybe even months. You need to study different quarters and read different books and read different thinkers and think about how different thinkers approach the subject matter. It takes weeks. And to do the educational standard, though, it takes days. It's a shorter period of time. To sit and think about, once you understand different approaches to the subject matter, then to write educational standards won't take as long. It'll take days. And then once you've done that, to write big ideas and essential questions, once you know and you have practice at doing that, takes minutes. But it's the same amount of thinking for each one. And this, I think, is the mistake that we make. And with this, I'll come to a close, which is that one of the mistakes that we make with our work about vision is that we spend all of our time on that left-hand column there, thinking about vision, spending weeks and weeks and weeks thinking about different approaches to pedagogy and to the subject matter, and we know that's really, really hard. When we come to then the practical stuff, the educational standards and the big ideas and the essential questions, which are really going to help us decide what we do in classrooms, because it takes us less time, we think that it's less hard, but it's not. It's not. Thinking about educational standards and thinking about articulating and writing big ideas and essential questions, which really manifest that theory of the subject matter in practice, is just as hard. So one of the mistakes that we make in vision and theory and the thinking about theory and practice is that we kind of get distracted or by the amount of time it takes, and we think that the practical stuff is easy, and it's really not. And if there's one thing that I spent much of my work doing, and if you take a course with me, we'll spend a lot of our time doing is we'll spend as much time thinking about each of these different aspects, thinking about practice as much as we think about vision, because ultimately when we shortchange the practice, when we shortchange the thinking about big ideas and essential questions, we get stuck in vision, we get stuck in theory, and what we don't do is move from theory to practice as we should do. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. If there are questions, things that were not clear. I know that there's a lot of phrases and terms here which may be new to people, and so it's hard to kind of get them all at once. But I'm happy if anything's not clear, if there are questions or things people want to say or disagree with or have discussion. We have some time now between now and the end. So the floor is yours.
I have a question.
Hi, Tamara. Yeah.
How are you? Well, first of all, thank you very much. And I find this very interesting. But without the vision, I do get it that we sometimes omit the big ideas and essential questions. But without the vision, you can't get anywhere, can you? I mean, you need to start with a vision. If you don't have your vision clear, where are you heading to? For instance, with the example you gave, of Zionism, with the vision you gave, with the Zionist vision you gave, the religious Zionist vision you gave, I immediately thought of Yoshua to teach as a text, or Ramban. So
I think what you just said is exactly right. Right, and you absolutely have to start with vision, and that's what taught us. I mean, the work on vision is critical, and again, this coming back to the title of this session, it's critical, but it's insufficient, because you absolutely must do that next step tomorrow that you just did, which is to say, okay, great, I've thought about this religious Zionist vision, I've understood it, I've read different thinkers about it, I've studied blah blah blah. But that's if it just stays there, then lo asinu klum, we haven't done anything. You have to then think about the big ideas, which then you have to think about the text. Yeah, that's going to take. I'm going to teach Yehoshua, and I'm going to teach other kinds of stuff like that, and that's going to push me into certain kinds of text and certain kinds of activities and certain kinds of thinking about those texts. Whereas if I want to teach biblical criticism, it's going to take me. I wouldn't teach Joshua. I wouldn't teach Joshua if I'm going to teach that. So it absolutely pushes us, the vision pushes us into practice. And so what we have to do as educators is to do both of those things. We have to do that whole journey. If you think about that slide I had towards the end with a line, with the line from one to the other, we have to that journey, it has to start at vision, but it can't end at vision.
thank you.
Okay, I think we can.
Can I? Sorry.
Yes, Matt. Okay.
Hi. Sorry. Can I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Just two things. One is the first. I really enjoyed what you were saying. I think it's like really interesting, important. I wondered on two things. One is you spoke a lot about in the context of schools. But I know that you also work a lot with communities. So like pedagogical implication in communities obviously is like a little bit different. So I was wondering if you had maybe probably don't have time to like go into it like now, but maybe places to look or read to further my understanding of like sort of the gap between vision and implementation, and just I guess any other wide reading I can do would be really interesting.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, by the way, not just communities, but also camps, synagogue schools, after school activities, youth movements. Like any education work that we do should be guided by vision. And when you build community, I mean, there are different types of community, and a lot of the time when people come together and want to make strategic decisions about community, it could be about what diddor to buy. It could be about what kinds of programs to fund and not fund. It could be about what kind of rabbis to hire, what kind of teachers to hire. There's 100 decisions that communities make. And I think that a lot of communities do that without really thinking about vision, about their sort of theory of who they are, and they do it based on gut instinct, based on what they've always done, based on who they like, that based on a whole bunch of things. I think it's really interesting work to think about what does it mean to help communities dig into who they are, why they are. And really dig into their vision, their theory of community, if you like, and then from that move into practical questions about like those kinds of things about, well, if that's who we are, then what does that mean about what kind of teachers we should be looking for, what kinds of qualifications we want our teachers to have, right? What kind of Israel experience or connection we want our kids to have. I mean, there's 100 questions that communities have to kind of struggle with and figure out, and I think it's a challenge to get to think about that from a strategic, vision-rooted perspective. In terms of what writing's been done about that, there is actually, I think, what somebody mentioned Alex Thompson before. There's a great book that he wrote with Randy Schnur, whose name the name of the book escapes me for a second, but it's a study of the Jewish community in Canada, in Toronto. And the name escapes me, but I'll dig it up afterwards, and I can send it to Marcelo, who can send it to you. Or you can just, if you search for Alex Thompson and Randall Schnoor, I think it's SCHNOOR. It's their book on a Jewish community in Toronto is a really interesting place to start with that.
And so, thank you so much. And can I ask one more thing?
Please.
Run out of time, which is just that I think maybe part of the reason why there is this kind of I guess overarching focus on vision, but then less when it comes to like practice as informed by vision, is because, like, I guess coming up with a vision is coming up with like a concrete set of ideals, whereas the implementation of said vision in sort of practical pedagogical terms is more of a pragmatic decision rather than an ideological one. Meaning, I have a certain ideology, and then the pedagogical choice I'm making is about which one I think is most likely to contribute to said vision. But it's not always. You might have two people with very similar visions taking opposite pedagogical approaches, or vice versa. They'll have two very different visions, but they will achieve them using similar pedagogical approach. So sometimes there's like a bit of a disjunct between, I don't know, it's not so easy. I mean, the examples you brought in the class, I guess, felt fairly straightforward, but I imagine that there are people who believe that the academic style study of Talmud is one which increases levels of sort of like I guess would like elevate a more, I guess, like sort of ideological spiritual vision, because you'll see the development enough through the eyes of Rav or Halacha through the eyes of Rav Kook, and you'll see. I mean, I think it's a bit more of a mishmash. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes sense. I think it makes total. I think there's always a dialectic. There's always a dialectic between theory and practice, right? And between those kinds of, when you look, as you say, education is a pragmatic discipline, right? That goes back to Dewey and before, and there's a dialectic between, let's say, one's ideology. I think that education is also, curricular decisions are ideological, or at least vision-driven decisions always. And that's true whether you're teaching Tanakh or English literature or history or maths. So there's always a dialectic between that kind of like that vision or that ideology or that theory, and between the pragmatic decisions about who these kids are, what's going to turn them on, what's going to excite them, what community am I working in, what context, who are their parents, who are their families, what are they doing on Shabbat, what are they doing on Sunday? All of those very practical questions about who the student is, those are in dialectic with the teacher, with the subject matter. If you studied Schwab wrote actually about not a dialectic but a quadrilectic, right? Four commonplaces. Think about curriculum. You have subject matter, curriculum, subject matter, teacher, student, and context, and society or social context, right? And so all of those things are in kind of dialogue with each other about the decisions we make. So you're right. It's never pure. It's never. I present it as a kind of pure, and a kind of, as Tamara was saying, you start with vision, you think, plan, bridge, go to practice, boom, there you are. It's never as simple as that, because when you're thinking about what how am I going to open my lesson tomorrow morning, I'm thinking about who am I, I'm thinking about what my school is, I'm thinking about the kids' context, I'm thinking about who the kids are, and I'm thinking about the subject matter. All of those things are in conversation with each other, and all of those things have to play a role. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Or spotlight?
You know, definitely. I think it validated it. It definitely validated it. And I think that just means that the answer is complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and Alex, thank you very much, and thank you all of you. And we will wait you in our next conference with Dr. Teacher. This conference will be translated to Spanish, and in January 22. And I will put here the chat. In the chat, I will put here the